Hello everybody, it's GirlGotGame and welcome back to our life. Today, it's a half episode because we're doing AU stuff. So, with that being said, I made some save files of moments that I'd like to try again. Thank you for the suggestions, by the way. I got some good ones lined up. So yeah, hopefully I don't miss anything too major, but these should be the biggins. We're gonna start back with Baby Cove. First of all, this was our first opportunity to tell Cove about the money. So, we're gonna do that today and see how the scene would have played out if little Molly had had the courage back then to be, hey, your dad offered me money. So, here we go.
Well, remember how you talked about how our parents met and I didn't know what happened?
Yeah?
I kinda had something happen that you don't know about when I met your dad.
As you struggled to find the right words, Cove looked at you passively. You met his gaze even as your stomach twisted itself into knots.
I was walking home, and your dad was sitting in front of the house. It must have been after you ran away. My moms weren't there either. I think they were looking for you. Your dad saw me. He got up and came over. Mr. Holden told me that he just moved into the house next to mine.
Cove was still listening, his expression as plain as before. You paused for a moment, wondering if you should really keep going. Oh man, it gives you another chance to back out. Interesting. Well, we're committed. Even if it was supposed to be a secret, you thought Cove should still know.
Your dad said he'd give me $20 if I became friends with you.
Cove was so still you thought he hadn't heard you. Then his eyes widened, his mouth fell open, but no sound left him. Silence stretched between you, so tense that it was almost tangible. You shifted from one foot to another, and your hands tensed up.
Hey, say something.
Instead of speaking, he closed his mouth. His eyebrows bent up, crinkling his forehead. He looked more sad than surprised now. He was going to cry. You were certain of it.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
Aw, poor Cove. Cove raised his hands and brought them up under his glasses. His fingers pressed over his eyes, hiding them from your sight. Then, right in the middle of the street, the tears began to fall. Oh no, it made Baby Cove sad, no! His shoulders shook with the force of his sobs. You could glimpse wetness through the cracks of his fingers slipping down his cheeks.
Hey, you shouldn't cry because of that.
I would have stepped closer. You tried to reduce the distance between the two of you. Oh no, he angry now. But Cove shook his body from side to side, rejecting your presence.
No.
Go away! You flinched at the shout. As you stood there listening to him cry, you felt... I would have felt bad about everything, yep. You wish you were still making sandcastles on the beach. Before Cove was sad, before Shiloh was mad, everything had been so much better then. Cove continued to weep with his face covered by his hands. Worse, his voice raised in volume. You were frozen in place. The situation was awful, and you kept feeling worse every second. I probably would have started crying too, little me. You didn't know what to do to stop Cove from panicking. You began to panic. Before you realized it, your eyes were misting over. Then you were crying with him. You couldn't stop. You heard a door opening, and you flinched, expecting to see one of the mean old grandparents preparing themselves to yell at you. At this hour, most people weren't around, either because they were working or down in the town, but the grandparents rarely left the house, except to complain at children making noise in the street. You didn't want Cove to have to deal with that right now. You tried to come up with something you could do for him, for the situation, for anything. But the door that stood open now didn't belong to the grandparents. To your utter surprise and relief, it was Cove's own. His dad was already home. Alright, Cliff, what are you going to do about this? As he peeked out his door, Mr. Holden momentarily looked unsure. Perhaps he had suspicions on the noise outside, but wasn't entirely positive. Though a kid crying is pretty distinct, and there aren't a lot of kids. Maybe he didn't want to believe something might be wrong with his son. His face fell as he spotted the source of the commotion. It was pained and it was scared, and it reminded you of the one he'd worn the first night you'd met Cove. Mr. Holden didn't go down the steps in front of his house. He just jumped right over them and stumbled into a run. He skidded to a stop before Cove, bent down on one knee, and then solidly cupped Cove's teary face with his hands.
What's wrong?
Are you hurt anywhere?
Cove continued to cry, unable or unwilling to cough out an explanation. Not taking his hands from Cove, Mr. Holden turned to you for explanation, his eyes wide and imploring.
Cove asked if you'd made me hang out with him. I just told him the truth. You tried to give me money.
As you spoke, Mr. Holden's chest rose while he inhaled a deep, shaky breath, culminating in a gasp at your final words.
What?
Sorry, Cliff!
Why? Why would you...
He clamped his mouth shut, shaking his head. He faced his crying son again.
No, it's my fault. I shouldn't have done something like that in the first place.
He cast his eyes down, sighing. When he next spoke, it wasn't part of a conversation anymore. It was barely loud enough for you to catch his words.
Molly's only a kid.
Tears were still streaming down Cove's face. Smiling sadly, Mr. Holden wiped Cove's cheeks with a thumb. He furrowed his brows and looked at the ground. When he next glanced up, his mouth was set with determination. Mr. Holden finally took his hands off Cove. He reached for his wallet. Confused, you stared at the little rectangle that all adults seemed to carry in some shape or form. It had been the source of all these problems. You were sure that Cove wouldn't want to be reminded of it right now. Mr. Holden was clearly of a different mind to you. He inexplicably retrieved another $20 bill, rolled it up, and raised it to Cove's face. Cove's eyes were hidden behind tightly clamped fingers, so Mr. Holden poked Cove's nose with the bill. Cove peeked between his hands and grunted as he saw what he had been prodded with. Even if it was surrounded by sobs, you were glad that something else had finally left Cove's mouth.
Come on.
Hey, Cove. Can you stop crying? I'll give you this cash if you do.
Cove dropped his hands from his face. It had already been red and wet with tears, but now his features were scrunched up in a scowl. Not for the first time you questioned Mr. Holden's tactics. I'm like, why are you doing that? I really hope you have a good reason for doing that. He had to use two hands, but Cove firmly shoved his dad's own hand away. But Mr. Holden just chuckled at Cove's reaction and tossed the money aside. It unfurled as it flew through the air, rising before slowly drifting to the ground. Oh, CG! Aw, Angie Cove. And very young Cliff. Mr. Holden took Cove's outstretched wrists and lowered them to Cove's side, stopping him from hiding his face once again. Cove's dad clearly wasn't going to let go. Huffing, Cove turned his whole head away, tears continuing to roll down his cheeks as he glowered at the ground.
You can buy a lot of cool things with that, but it can't do everything. Can it?
Cove didn't respond, not even to look at his father. Mr. Holden continued.
Your old dad likes to make things nice for you with the money he earns. But you're smart. You know that I haven't really done anything.
I'm sorry.
I still make you sad and upset, just like right now.
Cove sniffed, the harsh line of his brow mellowing. Mr. Holden squeezed Cove's hands as he continued.
Molly is smart too, right?
Mr. Holden spoke in a soft, encouraging tone, and Cove continued to calm.
You have nothing to worry about. Except for me!
Cove pressed his lips together, mulling over his father's words. Though the stream of tears had eased, drops still budded in his eyes and threatened to spill out.
I love you, son. So much. More than anybody else. Sometimes that makes me a little too hasty to see you happy, and I make it all worse. I really am sorry.
Scrunching his eyes tight, Cove nodded. When his eyes opened again, they were red and glossy, but there were no tears left on the precipice of his lower lashes. Aside from the occasional sniff, he was mostly back to his usual self. He swallowed.
Okay.
Though Cove had refused to echo Mr. Holden's exact words, the sentiment seemed to be enough for his dad. He moved his hands up under Cove's armpits and hoisted Cove high into the air with a grin. Cove's hands flew to his glasses, holding them back from falling off. Cove's lips were shut tight, all betrayed by the telltale smile in his eyes that he was trying hard to hide. Mr. Holden laughed, lowering Cove so that he was securely pinned against his chest. Cove looked away, face angled to the ground. Now that his dad could no longer see him, he was allowing himself a smile. Mr. Holden might have missed it, but you didn't. Cove wriggled, pushing a hand against his dad's shoulders.
Can I go back down now?
Yeah.
Mr. Holden set Cove gently on the ground, waiting until his feet found their footing before releasing him entirely.
I have to do something. Wait here.
As Cove wandered away, Mr. Holden's gaze stuck to him like glue. You sighed, eyes downcast. You felt weird that you'd only been able to stand there while the event unfolded. You weren't able to fix it.
How come I couldn't make him feel better?
Don't worry about it. Please. We don't need another tragedy today.
He winked and you weren't impressed. Yep.
Hey, I mean that. The first part, anyway. There's only so much you can do to try fixing someone else's mistake.
He smiled sincerely at you.
You've done plenty for Cove. Just the fact that you were honest with him when his own dad wasn't proves it.
That's a relief.
Thanks for being such a good kid. I hope you'll keep spending time with the boy.
Well, for another $20. Oh, my goodness. As though the sound of his name summoned him, Cove returned, clutching the bill his dad had cast aside earlier. You cocked your head and Cove's dad raised his eyebrows. Cove looked at the crumpled note, then walked over and held it out to you.
I stopped crying, but I don't want this. You can have it.
He gave you a small smile. Behind him, Mr. Holden was still watching Cove closely, clearly relieved. You shared the feeling. Cove was making peace with the deal that happened behind his back. I feel like he's paying me to continue being his friend, though, and I feel awful about that. No, I'm not gonna take it this time. I don't need to be paid this time! Shaking your head, you push the note back to Cove.
I don't need it.
But I don't want it.
You were at a stalemate. Well, I guess we'll have to give it to your dad. Mr. Holden hummed thoughtfully. Tapping his head, he gazed up at the wide sky as he pretended to give the conundrum serious consideration.
I know.
He plucked the bill from Cove and tore it right in two. You and Cove gasped in unison.
Dad! We can't do anything with it now.
True. It won't work at the store like this, but now you can split it.
Crouching down, he held out the pieces to you and Cove. You both looked at the two halves. Neither of you reached for them.
It still has value as a keepsake, a memory. And that's one of the most valuable things you can use money on.
So...
That sounds pretty good, huh? Maybe I'm getting smarter.
Wordlessly, Cove stretched out a hand and took his half. You took yours, running a finger along the jagged edge of the bill. It was cool to think that no other note would share this exact same feature, the precise peaks and troughs of troughs probably, of the tier, except for Cove's, which would bear them in reverse. It did feel like there was value left in it. I think... Oh, hey! Nice. The deal. During step 1, tell Cove about the deal his dad wanted to make. I think I heard that if you do this, because I heard this about the proposal, that there's like a torn $20 bill version. So I think this must be it. Is like, we both have a half of a $20 bill, so Cove will use it in a proposal, potentially, which is kind of cute. I like that. Mr. Holden stood up, stretching his arms out casually.
Well then, it's about time for dinner. Me and the Rugrat need to be going in. You probably should too. I bet your moms want to see you.
Alright.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Have a good night. And thanks, Molly.
Father and son waved at you as you turned and dashed back home, the note clenched tightly in your hand. You felt lighter. Aw. Cute. That was a really cute alternative way that things could have happened. I'm glad I didn't tell him in step 1, though. Alright, now we get the opportunity to tell him in step 2. Whew. Alright, how does this go? You decided to tell him. You took a deep, steadying breath to prepare yourself for the conversation. Now you just have to figure out how to tell him. You want to know something crazy? Okay, I gotta go back to, like, my tween self. Which my tween self wouldn't have said anything, but we've already done that, so if my tween self had a mental lapse... Cove, I have something important to tell you. Cove's head cocked to the side at your serious tone. He turned to give you his full attention.
What?
What is it?
You stared into his bright ocean eyes. You chickened out. Man, they really give you the opportunity to be like, just kidding, no. This happened back when you moved here. It was the first time I met your dad. There's not really any other way to say it, so... He offered me $20 to be friends with you. Cove sat still. Uncharacteristically, there was an unreadable expression on his face. His eyes seemed to look through you, and you didn't know what to do next. Then, without saying a word, Cove stood up from his bed in a single motion, and he just bolted right out of the room. For a moment, you didn't move a muscle. You were in shock. This was... Oh no. Your senses quickly came back. You shot out into the hall after him. You could see Cove down the way. He had already sprinted back to the living room. His arms were stock at his sides, with hands tightly balled into fists. He might not have been facing you, but you didn't need to see his face to know how he felt. Cove was furious. His parents were nearly finished setting the table. They greeted him, none the wiser of what was about to happen.
Huh?
Hey, what's up? When did you start running in the house?
Are you that famished?
You were able to catch up in full and stand near Cove. The parents' words didn't even register in his ears. Their child was wholly focused on another matter. He was practically shaking. Cove took one more step forward and glared up at his father's face.
You paid Molly to be friends with me?
Mr. Holden froze. He looked like a helpless deer caught in the headlights.
Seriously?
Uh-oh. Oh, Mom's in on this too. Oh, no. Clifford! Are you serious? He whipped his head towards Kyra, his eyes wide and blinking rapidly.
It was only one time.
The admission elicited an aghast expression from his ex-wife. Mr. Holden raised his hands up to gesture defensively.
It seemed like a good idea when it happened.
She covered her eyes with one hand. It was clear that her patience was frayed, but she was not so shocked anymore. Mr. Holden bowed his head, rubbing the back of his neck guiltily. The fact that she accepted this as something he'd do so easily seemed to be the most crushing part. Cove just stood there, fuming silently during their little aside. His eyebrows furrowed painfully and his eyes trembled. Well, awkward. I feel bad for everybody, including me. None of this was good at all. It was terrible. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but must have been only minutes, the tense silence was broken by Cove.
I don't want to stay here.
That immediately caught his parents' attention. They turned to him with twin expressions of worry.
Hey, wait a minute, bud. You don't have to do that.
It's alright.
There's still your room. We'll stay out of your way, I promise. Where could you go at this time of day? It's almost night.
No!
I can stay with Molly.
Huh. Interesting. So even though I admitted to taking money to be friends with him, he's not as mad at me. Okay. I mean, I'll take it. He stormed out of the house without waiting for another response. You jumped as the door slammed closed behind him. I gotta go. You didn't even take the time to say something to his stunned parents. You ran after Cove, shutting the door more softly behind you as you left. You spotted him easily. Cove hadn't made it far. He just reached the middle of the road. This is such a stupid question to ask, but I probably would have asked it. Are you okay? You might as well have said nothing. Cove didn't look back, nor did he answer you. Cove stomped forward, going across the street without hesitance towards your house. It didn't take long to approach the front door. You'd left it unlocked, so he yanked it open and went inside with you. By then, night fully came. The two of you stood tensely together in the middle of your living room. The night really hadn't gone as you imagined it would. At least Elizabeth wasn't around, and your moms were out. You had no idea how you would have explained the situation to them, and you were sure Cove wouldn't have been up for that. He watched you from a distance. His expression wasn't hostile, but was not exactly welcoming either. Who talks first? You talk first? I talk first? I'm really sorry, Cove. Cove shifted so his back was to you, then he crossed his arms over his chest. Are you mad at me? To your surprise, he actually responded.
What? No.
It's okay.
I wish I'd known before, but I guess there's never really a good time to bring up something like that. You're not the one who did anything.
His tone was clipped and insulting, though it was now fully clear that none of the negativity was towards you.
And we're actually friends, aren't we? It doesn't matter if you took it or not. You wouldn't pretend for years just because of Dad's money.
You nodded your head furiously at that. If there was one thing you didn't want this revelation to do, it was weaken your relationship. Of course we're friends. Cove seemed to appreciate your reassurance. The furrow in his brow eased a little.
Yeah, we are. I'm definitely not mad at you. I should thank you for not letting him get to you. And for telling me it happened. My dad never would've. He's always like that. He just does things. He doesn't ask or tell me about it or anything.
Cove threw his arms out, his features twisted in frustration.
There already was the thing with my mom coming to stay with us for the summer out of nowhere, and that was supposed to be a surprise I'd find out about. Who knows what other things he's done that I've never heard of? Does he even know how to think about what someone else might actually want?
He paused to take a panting breath, scowling. Would I have said anything? Or I probably would have just listened quietly. Uninterrupted by you, Cove went on with his spiel.
The worst part is, I know he doesn't do stuff for himself. He does things because he wants to make people happy.
Cove blinked rapidly, and you noticed tears were gathering in his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with emotion.
But he just makes everything worse, and then he's really sorry, and it's like it's your fault for not being happy that he was at least trying. And what if all his plans and always being so pushy did change things?
What things? Cove finally met your gaze, his bottom lip trembling. You realized then that he was referring to you and him.
What if what he did made you stay away from me before we even got to know each other?
Aw, Cove. His voice cracked as he forced himself to speak through the tears that began to fall in earnest. He did everything he could to say it, but the words were barely a whisper.
Molly.
You were the best thing about coming here.
Cove was honestly terrified over the idea that there was a chance the two of you might not have what you do. I'm gonna give you a hug. I would've, in this moment. Cove readily accepted the embrace. He wrapped his arms around you in return. The grip was firm. Either this one or this one. Probably this one. I wouldn't have let anything your dad or anyone else did mess things up. His features crumpled at your words. More tears threatened to fall down his cheek, but he stubbornly blinked them away. You remained like that for just a little while. Then he scrubbed his eyes with the back of one hand. His gaze turned away from you, growing distant.
He's like that with my mom, too.
The anger he had begun to release bubbled back to the surface.
Dad wants to make people happy, but he doesn't.
The words landed scathingly hard. You were certain it'd crush Mr. Holden if he heard them. You'd never known much about his parents' relationship, but you thought you understood it a bit better now. He doesn't. Because we know things from the future, but that we don't have information right now. I'm gonna continue to feel bad. Cove just looked at the ground. As the two of you were stifled by the quiet, a thought came to your mind, abrupt and sudden. What about your fish? I don't remember this moment enough to be like, what about your fish? You know what? Let's tell him about the day. That his dad really... let's just tell him about the day. I remember that day, when it happened. You ran to the hills behind the house, and Mr. Holden waited for you to come back while my moms checked the park for you. That was when I met you for the first time, after he talked to me about you. Cove lifted his eyes just enough to see you. His head remained low.
I remember too. When we first moved to Sunset Bird, I felt like I lost my whole life.
Maybe that's why he wanted to help you start a life here so much. His eyebrows scrunched up and he seemed on the verge of tears once more. It was obvious Cove didn't want to think about his dad that way, but it was also hard not to right now. He must be conflicted over where to go from here. You need to learn how to communicate. I like this one. I'll be on your side, no matter what you do about your dad. Cove smiled thoughtfully. He didn't say anything, but you had a feeling he appreciated the support.
I'm going back home.
Hey, the deal part 2. His face was set in determination. There was no way you could tell him to do anything else, even if you wanted to. So you only nodded.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Molly. I'm sorry about all this.
Goodbye! Can I come with you?
Yeah? Why wouldn't you go?
Thanks, Boo. You smiled lightly. Just checking. Cove nodded and headed outside. You followed behind him. Once again, the two of you made your way across the street towards his house. He didn't pause at the door. He just opened it wide and went in. Cove's parents were sitting at the table, their heads bowed and silence between them. They snapped over at the sound of the door, relieved to see Cove return. Mr. Holden stood up so suddenly, his chair squealed across the floor.
Cove?
Kyra got out of her chair as well, but less dramatically. How are you feeling, baby?
I wanted to talk to you.
His parents looked over him, their features soft. Cove instead snuck a glance at you. I'm glad I could be here for him. You stared back solidly, hoping you could convey your support with your eyes. It must have worked, because Cove stood up a bit straighter. Cove then fully faced his parents. Mr. Holden stepped forward cautiously, his expression twisting in dismay.
I am so sorry. I should never have done something so stupid. It's okay. It really isn't. That was a boneheaded move if ever there was one. I was bribing an actual child, one I'd never even met before that day.
Cove almost cracked a smile, though he quickly regained his composure.
Then it isn't. But I want things to be okay anyway.
I'm sorry.
Kyra placed a hand on Mr. Holden's shoulders.
Your dad doesn't believe there's something wrong with you, or that you can't make your own friends. He can explain.
I know.
I know why Dad did it. He wanted me to be happy, that's all. He didn't think it'd be like this. It was an accident.
Kyra sighed heavily. A sad smile appeared on her lips.
You're very grown up, Cove.
Mr. Holden brought his hands up against his forehead and began to pace around the room. He didn't seem to know what to do with himself. He turned back around to face Cove and Kyra. He looked more solemn than you'd ever seen him.
I'm not going to do it again. I haven't done it again.
Haven't tried to bribe more people, or haven't continued to step over a line without registering it?
Both!
He let out a heavy breath before shrinking down a little. It was impressive because he was pretty tall.
I'm trying.
I don't know, but I don't think so.
Cove's throat bobbed as he swallowed thickly. He looked like he was trying to gather all his courage. When he spoke up, his voice was small but firm.
You invited Mom here.
His dad's eyes widened. Cove was ready to have a talk he had put off before. Oh dang.
You didn't ask me if I wanted things to be like this, with both of you together again for just a little while.
Mr. Holden's hand slowly returned to his forehead. He was stunned, as if someone had just hit him.
I did it again. I did it again, and I didn't even notice. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just do something right?
At least Cove seemed relieved that he was able to say what he felt. You knew just how long he'd been holding that in. It was quiet for a long stretch. Mr. Holden had sat down in a chair, his shoulders drooped and his head in his hands. You looked to Cove. He watched his dad and how genuinely he was struggling with what he'd been told. Cove glanced down at the ground, then looked back to his dad.
I'm not angry anymore.
Slowly, Mr. Holden met his son's eyes.
I can try to talk to you about things and what I feel about stuff. I stopped saying that to you since everything happened. I didn't want to talk to you, but you won't have to guess if you know.
Mr. Holden broke eye contact at that, shaking his head.
God.
My child shouldn't have to take care of me. You shouldn't have to make up for my shortcomings, Cove. I can fix things. I can still change.
After having something of an outburst, Mr. Holden turned his face away and spoke more guardedly.
Besides, I'm used to that already. I might not get it right, but not a damn thing would happen in what's left of this family if I wasn't making the effort. It's always me. What's one more thing to manage? Dad.
I see.
You're right, Cliff. I know. But I don't think Cove wants to take care of you. He just wants to understand. And he wants his dad to understand too. That's what matters, isn't it?
It was still as Mr. Holden digested what Kyra said. He stared down at his empty hands held out in front of him. When he looked at Cove again, tiny tears glimmered in the corners of his eyes. He got up and crossed the room to his son. Cove didn't move or look away as he approached. Mr. Holden set his hands on Cove's shoulders, the touch firm. He furrowed his brows.
Bud, you and I are going to talk about every single thought that ever pops into our heads. For the rest of your life.
I love this family. I love them so much. Good grief. They're broken, but still good. Still good. He shook Cove forward and back a bit. Tears slipped down Cove's cheeks, but he was smiling.
What?
No, I don't want that.
Mr. Holden began to smile too. It trembled at the corners, but it was genuine.
I'm afraid it's the only way.
Kyra chuckled, even as she blinked away her own tears. Mr. Holden turned towards her.
You better not be thinking you can get away from this, Kyra. The same is gonna apply to you.
You can't! He let go of Cove with one hand while he placed his other arm around Cove's shoulders. Then he faced Kyra.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, I can.
He continued to talk as he walked in her direction, bringing Cove along with him. Aww, the family! So cute! Stop, my heart. Then, father and son were standing in front of her. Mr. Holden put his other arm around her. Now he had both of them in his arms.
If you think the ideas that I actually go with are bad, you two are going to be amazed by the thoughts I decide against all on my own.
Kyra jokingly cringed at the concept. Cove smiled tearfully up at his parents.
Thanks, Dad.
I'm so glad.
Thank you, son. But hey, you know what I'm thinking now?
Cove, wiping his face with the back of his hand, shook his head. God, no. You're an incomprehensible maniac. Mr. Holden laughed, not disputing her words.
I'm thinking we should eat that dinner I painstakingly made. It's salvageable, just gotta heat it back up.
Kyra sighed in exaggerated relief.
Can do.
That we can manage. Right, Cove?
Yeah. Great! We're making progress already.
Well...
Though, I don't even know how I'm going to start making this up to Molly. Carrying that secret for all this time must have been quite the burden to bear. $20 is not nearly enough for all the hullabaloo.
You don't have to do anything.
Nonsense! I, or we, will work on it.
Okay. Cove ducked his head and spoke towards you. There was a tiny smile on his face.
Do you want to stay for dinner still?
You nodded softly. Mr. Holden finally let go of his family. Kyra patted him on the back with a content sigh. You're very good boys. I'm so lucky. Cove shyly rubbed his arm, while Mr. Holden nervously rubbed his neck. So cute. Neither could make eye contact out of bashfulness. In that moment, they really did seem like father and son. Cove's family was nice, you thought to yourself. You were glad that you got to come over. Man, that was so different from playing cards with them. I loved it, though. Still glad I told Cove when I did. Alright, we're moving on to our road trip. Let's do that next. This was suggested that I try to give this boy a big ol' smooch. So I'm going to try to smooch him, and then we're going to skip to the end of step 2. Because we never saw the confession there. And if you do this, he'll make a reference to this kiss as well at the end of step 2, I believe, if I got my notes straight. Anyway, gonna try. You moved in even closer, eyes half closed as your lips inched towards his, so slowly. Cove froze immediately. You could feel his body trembling against you as you neared. You grew close enough to be one motion away from placing your lips together. Then, all at once, he bolted upright, completely forgetting the restrictions of the location and smacking his head against the roof of the RV with a loud crack, making you gasp aloud.
Oh!
Cove, are you okay? Cove didn't answer. He fell back to the loft floor in a flustered pile. He pressed one hand against his head and the other over his face as he groaned in pain. Oh no! The sound of movements in the RV below startled you, and when you looked over the side, you noticed Cliff had similarly shot up and was looking around wildly.
What's wrong?
Wake up! Something's happened! Oh no.
Wake up, people! Something's happened!
Cliff reached over to where Kyra was on the couch, and she whined as he shook her out of a sleep deep enough not to be interrupted by the chaos. What's going on? And then the lights came on, and you scrambled under the blanket to avoid being seen, but it was too late.
What?
Cove? Where are you? Molly, are you... Oh! Don't look at me! Don't look at me! It only took a second for Kyra to figure out where her son had gone, and you soon heard Cliff's chuckle as he too realized.
You were warned there wasn't much room up there, bud.
Cove groaned terribly again, but this time it was out of humiliation. He moved the hand from his sore scalp to also cover his shame, rather than face his parents.
Hey!
What's with all the noise out here? To your horror, the door at the back of the RV opened, and Elizabeth, as well as your moms, peeked their heads out into the hall.
Is everything okay?
Sorry.
It's nothing! Sorry for waking you up.
Cove curled into himself, completely humiliated as he apologized a couple more times. Not loud enough for anyone other than you to hear, though. I would not laugh. I would be so mortified in the situation, so this is as close as I can get. Are you okay, Cove? With another whimper, Cove pushed himself up onto his side.
Not really. I should probably get Mom to look at it.
Kyra casually came on over to the edge of the loft. She patted her son on the back. Come to Mama, baby. You can't stay there. There was no putting it off. Cove climbed down the ladder, his face still red as a tomato when he reached the bottom. His dad gave him a nudge on the shoulder as he passed, trying to hold back renewed laughter, and his mom pulled him over to give his head a quick look over. After announcing it wasn't anything more serious than a bump, Cove shuffled over to his sleeping bag on the ground. He collapsed into it, not caring if he should be more cautious with his head right now.
Sure.
Alright, show's over. Let's all get some sleep.
You could hear the snickers from the back of the RV from your moms and Elizabeth. They really had been watching this unfold like it was a piece of entertainment. But at that, they quickly said goodnight and headed to bed. With nothing more you could do, you laid back down as the lights went off again. You stayed there completely still until sleep finally overtook you. Did anything else change with this? Blinking the sleep from your eyes, you peeked over the edge of the loft slowly, trying not to be seen. Cove was sitting on the couch with his mom, the two of them talking quietly together. His head was hung low. You blushed when you remembered what it was like last night, just the two of you up in the loft together and the way you almost kissed. Kyra suddenly looked up and caught your eye, and your face grew even hotter, though she simply smiled at you. It was gonna be a long, long time before either of you lived this down, if you ever did. Okay. Let's see. Probably felt weird. Yes. Okay. That was the only other thing that changed. Well, entertaining, embarrassing, and all that good stuff. Actually, don't do this. I need to go, and then summer ended. We're not gonna do these two. It should be fine. I'm gonna try to remember things that I did at the end here. Anxiety? Yes, anxiety for sure. Kyra, I think. Yes, okay, we were fond of Kyra. We put on an ankle bracelet. I remember that distinctly. Couldn't wait to see Cove, bounded downstairs. Time's going by fast. Sounds like something I'd say. Probably noticed the anklet. Yes. Did I say quiet? I did. I was quiet. I did wear it for you, maybe. Alright. Something's changed! Cove's posture teetered, his eyelids blinking quickly.
Molly, I actually kind of wanted to talk about...
He drew a deep breath before concluding the sentence.
I mean...
What happened on the trip?
His voice shook as he pushed the words out. Your eyes grew. At the reaction, Cove pulled his arms around his chest, his shoulders hunching inwards. You knew what he was implying, back when you'd been in the loft and nearly kissed. Cove hadn't breathed a word about it since it happened, or, well, almost happened.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for moving away like that when you tried to...
He dropped the sentence. You didn't push for him to finish. It had conveyed what it needed.
And I'm sorry for how I've been since, you know, acting like it didn't even happen. I've thought about it. I mean, I haven't forgotten about it. I don't keep thinking about it all the time.
Uh-huh. He hung his red-cheeked head, forehead propped up by a couple of fingers. You could tell that he was already regretting how this was going.
Sorry.
Sorry for being weird. It's just... I kind of thought, or hoped, that sometime I'd be able to do this. with me talking about everything.
Everything? There's more? He nodded ever so slightly. Your face felt a lot hotter after that. Cove brightened a little at your positive reaction, and his explanation continued.
Well, could sort of picture how it might go. What it'd be like with you and me. But just the first part. I couldn't ever imagine anything that'd come after. And now it's actually happened. We're there. It's...
He took another deep breath, stuttering on the exhale.
That's,
This makes things different.
Should we find a crystal ball for answers? This is hard for me. He gave you a wan smile.
I know. I'm sorry I'm always bad at this.
His wide eyes met yours as he looked at you, less burdened from the anxiety that had built inside him.
Ooh, do you want to try again?
Yeah, you know what? AU Molly's a little more straightforward. Why not? Do you want to try again?
No!
The word shot out reflexively. He couldn't help it, but immediately cringed at himself. Do you really mean that?
No. I mean, I do. Want to. I want to try again if you still want to.
Alright. Terrified, but we're going for the smooch. You untangled yourself from your resting position and stood up. Realizing your intent to actually go for it, Cove straightened up in the chair, his hands coiled together in his lap. As you moved towards him, you noticed his knees knocking together as he trembled. His decision not to rise from the chair made perfect sense. He's at a good height for me, too, at this angle, so this works. He's just being considerate, okay? If he was that shaky while sitting down, there was no way he'd manage to stand without at least one of you falling over. Your legs brushed against his quivering ones as you came to a stop in front of him. Cove was staring up at you. As you leaned in towards him, he echoed the motion and drew in towards you. Once you were close enough to feel Cove's breath on your face, you closed your eyes. The last thing you saw was Cove quickly doing the same. Hey! An actual kiss CG, let's go! I love that! Your lips met with Cove's for a moment. His lips were pressed tightly together, unyielding, but it was alright. You were kissing him, and he was kissing you. Your stomach somersaulted. You couldn't believe it was really happening. In that moment, it felt warm, and it felt nice, and it felt right. You drew back, and Cove slipped down into the chair, the knuckles of his hands pale after gripping so tightly. Thinking that he could do with some space to breathe, figuratively and literally, you took a step back. Cove shot up, his stance rigid. You good? I hope you're not wiping my kiss away, Cove. Cove plastered a hand over his mouth, his eyes shut tight. His back then became bowed, shrinking him down. You could only just make out the few words he had managed to summon.
oh my god.
Stop!
I can't believe we actually...
His eyes flew open wide, but he didn't look your way, let alone meet your gaze.
Oh my god.
We kissed. We... kissed.
His reaction was really cute. You watched him adoringly as he tried to gather his senses. Cove only slammed his eyes closed once again. Was it bad? Did you like it? Oh gosh. It was nice, wasn't it? He was still holding the hand to his face, but in an attempt to answer, he emitted a muffled whimper. With that obviously not working, he uncovered his face at last, bringing the hand to lay against his chest, and looked at you.
Yeah.
He opened his mouth, poised to speak, and pursed his lips as words failed him. On his third or fourth attempt, you heard what he had to say.
I did like it. I'm glad that we,
He swallowed, seemingly not able to speak the actual word. You could relate. It was really embarrassing to say it out loud. You grinned, thrilled that the experience had been a welcome one. The smile on Cove's face was real, but weary, not unlike the one he wore after a long and exhausting day of activity. Like when he'd made a new personal best. The work had been hard, but the reward had been worth it. With some newfound confidence, he drew himself up as he inhaled deeply. Each word he spoke next was delicate.
Molly.
I like you. A lot. Probably way too much.
He ducked his head bashfully and opened an eye, peeking at you through the hair that had fallen over his face like a veil. He'd managed a smile.
Thanks for waiting for me.
Oh, Cove. His eyes sparkled just looking at you, his affection transparently clear. He never could hide what he was feeling, and you couldn't be more grateful for that today. I like you too. Cove squeaked out a nervous giggle. He curled his hand into a loose fist and brushed the knuckles idly against his cheek. Words evaded him as he opened his mouth and closed it again.
I don't...
He gave up on finishing the sentence, instead just smiling again. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hands. It was an action usually reserved for much later in the day, but at this point it already felt like a long day. Cove then pressed a hand to his creased forehead.
Oh my god.
Cove, calm down.
Does this mean I'm your boyfriend or something now? Should we tell your parents? Should we tell our parents? I don't know what Dad or Mom would do.
There were a lot of concerns in there. You honed in on the simplest. There was no way your moms would let you have a boyfriend, even though that word juxtaposed with Cove's name made your heart race. Mine neither. It doesn't matter, though. We like each other, and that's what's important. Nothing anybody else thought about your relationship changed what it was between the two of you. Cove lifted his hand from his chest and reached towards you, halting halfway, then, slowly, cautiously, hooked his fingers around yours, his palm pressed against the back of your hand. You held his hand back. You rotated your hand so that you were palm to palm with Cove, your thumbs crossing one another. Budding relationship, yay!
We can get it to work. We always figure things out sooner or later.
Your brown eyes locked with his and said the words that your smiling mouth couldn't. His eyes widened, the message received. He returned the smile eagerly, his grip on your hand tightening.
Molly! Cove!
The sudden call from downstairs caught you both unaware. You'd nearly forgotten the world outside your room. From the guilty look on his face, Cove had done the same.
Just had a call. Cove's mom is ready to go. If you're quick, she might keep the mandated motherly smothering to a minimum.
You doubted that, but it was nice that Mom and Miss Priest had their strange sense of humor in common. Your eyes met Cove's. Wordlessly, you headed downstairs together. That might be the end of everything. Did I give us back? Yeah, I did, okay.
Hi.
We'll just go through this really quickly. Hopefully I remember everything. Call out, goodbye. Did I just nod? Yep, I nodded.
Awesome.
Let's do it. I can't remember what I thought about his idea. Nope. That was it. I gave a look to the other two. Did I say no? It's Australia? Yep. Shocked at Jeremy.
What?
I went after Jeremy again. Don't say anything.
So what?
I don't know what to think about him. Okay, good. I'm remembering stuff. Good, good, good. Homebound, here we go. We've done both of these. I'll just nod, walk side by side with him. Okay. There's a little bit of difference here. Interesting. But he blushed a little and began fidgeting with his silverware. His dad was the first to pick up on his extra awkwardness, but your moms weren't far behind. The parents shared looks at Cove's reaction. It seemed that he was struggling with how to act normal around his dad or your parents, or both, after what happened between the two of you upstairs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had a great time.
It was fine.
I had fun.
I really liked it. As you passed Cove his drink, your hands touched. Cove froze. And so did you. Unfortunately, the cup didn't. It slipped right through both of your fingers. The glass fell down to the table, landing with the sharp clatter of glass on wood. Cove scooted his chair back with a restrained shout.
Sorry.
I'll just get a towel or something.
He looked around in a frantic panic, as if an object to soak up the water would magically appear if he turned his head fast enough. His dad bit his lip in worry, rising from his own seat.
Well...
Cove, what's going on? You've been a little out of it today. Did something happen?
Cove tensed, frozen again. He stared at the water on the tabletop as if he wanted to sink into it. Blank. Your back stiffened straight, unsure of what to do. Cove and you were a pair of statues. An awkward and red-faced pair of statues. I started to move between you and Cove. The shared silence was deafening with the unsaid sitting on your lips. Mr. Holden cleared his throat.
That's...
Well, it's no problem. Don't worry about it there, bud.
Yes?
We were just worried, but you don't have to feel any pressure. We all have matters that are private and personal.
Your ma gave a soft giggle, and Cove breathed a sigh, but everyone went back to passing drinks around. Are we good? Are we home safe?
There, there.
I teased Cove for his bad habits.
Talk to you later.
I think I nudged him, but I'll hug him goodbye this time.
Dude. Well...
Or I guess I hugged him goodbye last time? I can't remember. Is everything okay?
This sucks.
I channeled some optimism.
Sorry.
I could be with a guy.
So...
Right, he ducked his head further. You already knew the answer. You had confronted that very topic this afternoon. Well, I like Cove, so... I want us to be friends forever, though, Derek. Your route's next, though, so... Did I do that one? No, not that one. I'm glad we met before it started. That's what it was. High five to you, buddy.
Have a good one.
Come back soon. Can we tell Lee about the smooch?
Boo.
Boo. Doesn't look like it. Okay. So I'll just move on to talk about her. Glad you picked the right answer. Yeah. Before you go, there's one other thing. I kissed Cove today. There was a pause of silence. Knowing your cousin, you decided to pull your ear away from the phone. As expected, a screech loud enough for you to still make out clearly from a distance crackled through the speaker. When you felt it was safe, you put the phone back against your head. Lee was still gushing to herself, though a little less loudly.
Why didn't you say so sooner? He had to have kissed you back, right? You two are the most perfect pair ever. Tell me, please.
You used the precious little time you had left to try filling her in as best you were capable of in that moment. But soon the approach of curfew became too much for you to ignore, despite how excited the both of you were. At that, you decided it was time to say goodbye for now. You did have school to wake up for in the morning. Bye, Lee.
Bye.
See you, girl. Smacked the window. I went outside to go talk to him. We're gonna have a different talk. Nodded? Nope, wasn't a nod. I feel good? Nope. I know how you feel? Nope. Shrugged? Nope. Is this... What the... You know what? I'm just gonna go. I know how you feel. It's hard to stay still. Tomorrow's gonna be the start of a new year. At the mention of school, a small noise escaped him. Did I sit? Yes, I
I'm
sat.
sorry.
Cove just stared at you unblinkingly. What?
It's you.
Huh? He snickered before answering. He looked thoroughly amused with your reaction. Oh, right, you're being me. Huh? So do you, Cove, okay?
Really?
Yes, always. Cove couldn't help but grin at that. Honestly, there weren't many people you could think of who could tease you about something like that. Duh.
Tomorrow.
It was hard not to think about Cove. There hadn't been enough time to really figure it all out after what happened between you. You felt excited. There was little doubt in your mind that things were moving forward, and you couldn't wait to find out what changes were waiting for you on the horizon. And then we fell asleep. Eyes snapped open. Always, man. Okay, cool. So that's another thing donezo. I guess next is the boat. My goodness, though, we have a lot more to do. Like it's already been an hour, and there's still like a lot more. We might have to make this a part 2, guys. I think I will. I think next time we had a lot of good moments in here. Let's end it with we had the smooch. Smooch accomplished. Step 2. We'll come, and next time we'll do like the boat. Step 3 confession. Step 4 confession. The vows I never finished, so yeah, let's just go to the menu. We'll have a nice little beach thing to look at. I'm gonna take some pity on you guys. I'm not gonna make you watch like a 3-hour video today. 1 hour's good. I think we need to just soak in like the 1 hour of alternate universe stuff we got, and we'll continue next week. All right, until then, guys, I will see you later.